Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So, of course, starting off with the boxing news, and Hatton and Couch have been inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Bevis has joined the Stomping Ground. Ennis will fight Avanesian July 13th. Of course, I thought it was Ennis that had an injury and was Crowley who was the one who was going to get this fight versus Avanesian, but obviously I was wrong, and so it's great to see that Ennis is still fighting. I think Avanesian is definitely a good replacement opponent, and he's somebody who everybody's still going to expect Ennis to go through relatively easily, but it'd be interesting to see if they try and remake the fight with Crowley, or if he wins against Avanesian, they then move him on to even bigger fights which are available to him. We'll have to wait and see. Anderson has teamed up with Sugar Hill Stewart. GBM Sports have announced a multi-fight deal with DAZN. Optaya, Shiraz vs Eubank Jr., Boatsi vs Hutchinson, and Wardley vs Clark 2 could fight September 21st. That's what's getting rumoured for this huge AJ Dubois rumoured card for September 21st. Optaya hasn't really got an opponent arranged next or anything, so it could be anybody that he could be facing. Shiraz Eubank Jr., that would be a great fight, but I don't necessarily know if Eubank Jr. would be wanting to do that, so we'll have to wait and see. Boatsi Hutchinson's another good fight as well, but not Boatsi Yard, which is interesting, and obviously there's quite a few things going on with Yard at the moment, so maybe they're just trying to get a fight for Boatsi, but also having the likes of Boatsi and Clark featuring on a Riyadh season type card would show Boxer are finally willing to work with them, and that's huge as well, and that's another organisation being able to be involved with them, so it seems like that could be a possibility. And then we could possibly also be seeing Ben Shalom in the same kind of venue as Eddie Hearn at the same time, so they could even start working together. We will have to wait and see about that though. Inoue won't be fighting on that September 21st card that I was just on about. Yeah, it seems like he's probably wanting to be a main event for a card, which makes sense, and he still doesn't really want to be fighting in England at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see if he ever really does. But yeah, at the same time, he isn't going to be fighting on that card. Martinez versus Gongora and Dilmagani versus Giron will fight June 28th. Paul may fight Perry July 20th. I haven't really heard too much about it. I heard it was rumoured, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But obviously, Paul's got that fight versus Tyson in November now, so it could be good to have a little fight in between, but the Perry one would be a very tough fight, I think. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund are in talks to create a global boxing league, which is crazily big for boxing, to be completely honest. It's just a huge thing. It would make the format similar to that of the UFC. It would be like 200 fighters, 15 from each weight class, just constantly fighting each other ranked wise. I don't necessarily know how it would work if a fighter drops off, if they just would put another newer fighter in or not. But yeah, it would be crazy. It would pretty much make things like other organisations and other brands like Matchroom, Queensberry a bit unnecessary, to be honest. It would make all the big fights be around that. It's just huge for the sport if it ever does happen. Obviously, Saudis are taking over every sport seemingly, and so yeah, if that does end up happening, it would be massive and it would change a lot, but I think it would take a lot for it to happen. But yeah, with the money going around, you do never know. Catterall is set to fight Valberza Jr. August 24th. Vuong will fight Afori June 22nd, and because of that, Vuong versus Flynn is off again. Espinoza has joined Top Rank. Chelly will fight Simpson August 3rd. Crocker will rematch Papadopoulos September 7th. Great to see Crocker in another big fight. Crawford, Shiraz and Anderson are Riyadh season ambassadors, so seemingly they're just going to keep getting fights with Riyadh season and all that goes around with them. So as the ambassadors, people like the Crawford and the Shiraz I'm not really too surprised about. Anderson one's an interesting one, but he is a big talent, so of course he's going to have that big back in as well. Moving on, Smith has vacated his British title, and the BBOFC have ordered Rafferty versus Turner for that belt. WBA have ordered Inoue vs Akhmadaliev, but Bob Arum was keen to say that Akhmadaliev is not worthy of a shot versus Inoue, and perhaps I'd have to agree, but I suppose at the same time, unless he's fighting Casemiro, who also isn't, too crazy of a fighter in the division, who else could he really be fighting? Moving on. Harper is going down to lightweight. Clava has joined Matchroom. Mayweather will rematch Gotti 3, August 24th. That's fight's been announced, that rematch, a couple of times now, so we might actually end up seeing it. I don't really mind. I think it probably is one of the more entertaining exhibition fights in which Mayweather could have, so perhaps it could be interesting. BBB OFC have ordered Brathwaite versus Dawood. Cooper will fight June 28th. Talon won via points versus Vircia Narcos. Price won via points versus Flores. Watson won via points versus Radomska. Tollwood won via TK round 2 versus Saeed. Marksby won via points versus Antin. Kelly drew versus Warburton. Woodall won via TK round 6 versus Richards to become WBO Intercontinental Super Middleweight Champion. Barayu won by unanimous decision versus McGowan to remain EBU European Super Welterweight Champion, and it was great to see Towood get another impressive stoppage win. He's really building himself as a fighter, and was a pleasure to speak to him a little while ago. It was sad to see Richards get stopped. I think you can blame that perhaps quite a lot on ring rust and things like that, and not fighting somebody really at the highest of levels for a while now. And all credit to Woodall, he really did make a shocking performance and put out a very good stoppage, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he can go next from this. And another great performance from Barayu, somebody who I also had the pleasure of speaking to, and he's somebody who's always going to be in these tough, gritty fights, but also at the same time has a lot of skill and really can fight on the inside well. And I think European level is probably his level, but you never know, he could progress up. And yeah, he is a good fighter, and he's proven that he can beat these British guys and come to British soil and win against them. And McGowan is a very tough guy and took a lot of punishment, but also gave out his own punishment as well, and Barayu can also take that as well. So two warriors, and respect to both of them. Moving on, Pochetti won via KO in round 1 versus Vermeer. Frierson won via points versus Simmons. Miller won via TK in round 1 versus Mosquera. Hennessy won via points versus Norek. Aziz drew versus Sepp. Whitaker won via unanimous decision versus Arienka to become IBF International Light Heavyweight Champion. Massey won via unanimous decision versus Chamberlain to become Commonwealth and EBU European Cruiserweight Champion. Billam-Smith won via unanimous decision versus Rapaport to remain WBO World Cruiserweight Champion. And to speak about that card, I think in general, for a stadium card, perhaps it did disappoint a little bit in my opinion. I think there were some good fights on it. I think there were some good names involved with it, but just in general, I think it perhaps did fall a little bit flat in my opinion. Obviously, Hennessy put out another good performance. The Aziz draw versus Sepp wasn't really the best of performances from Aziz. He was getting hit with a lot of shots, not really seemingly doing much defensive-wise or making much adjustments to be able to stop what was coming, and Sepp put out a good performance and probably could have deserved to have gotten the win, but nonetheless, it'll be interesting to see where Aziz goes from this now, going from such the highest of highs. Of course it makes sense where perhaps it has affected him and things like that, and I don't know, I think style-wise he has lost some attributes which made him good in the first place, but we'll have to wait and see if he can get them back. The Whitaker fight is always going to be an entertaining one whenever he fights, and he showed that pizzazz in which he has. He showed that entertaining element. Arienka came to try and derail the hype and put on a little bit of a show himself. He wanted to showboat and show that that Whitaker was the only person that could do that, and he did. But also, he did very much just lose his head. And when he was headbutting him and doing things like that and going and hitting him with the elbow and crazy things like that, you can tell that he wasn't mentally in the right place to be dealing with a fighter like Whitaker, and you really can't lose your head against somebody like him. And Whitaker yet again showing his skill, showing his class, and showing that he is a very good fighter. Perhaps certain things, still getting hit with certain shots at times and not being able to get an opponent like that out of there. It does show certain aspects, but for now he's going to keep progressing, and there was nothing wrong with the performance in which he just had. Arienka is a tough guy and is going to have not really, it would have taken a real lot to have stopped him, and yeah, it's just another one of them progressing fights. Of course, now he's got a title to his name, and within 7 fights, he's, like I say, progressing very well, and he has a lot of people seemingly against him, but he doesn't really seem to be fumbling under any sort of pressure as of the moment. The Massey one versus Chamberlain was an interesting fight. I think it was going back and forth a lot, but then Massey also showed a level of ability above Chamberlain. I think he is the better boxer than him, and put out a good performance and upset the odds. And I mean, with the Aziz, this one, and even the main event as well, there was 3 relatively big upsets, but in general, I don't think Chamberlain fought as perhaps as well as what he could have, but Massey, yeah, he did fight well. I think he was definitely underrated and was definitely the tougher opponent than that of what Seslak would have been against Chamberlain, and now that's big for him. And perhaps I would love to see Chamberlain versus Riley next, but we don't necessarily know what could happen. Then Massey versus Seslak, but yeah, I just hope that Massey gets the backing that he deserves and keeps having big fights, and he clearly shows that he can fight around this level very, very well. And then the billam-smith one versus Riakporhe, that was a strange fight. Billam-smith fought well, he manoeuvred and used his strength, and like I say, yeah, just kind of nullified a lot of Riakporhe's attacks, but Riakporhe just didn't really come to seemingly fight as much as what he should have. I think he was slow at times and just didn't really look. He looked a bit complacent at times and went for big shots and they just weren't never really landing. And when it's your home stadium and you've got all the eyes on you, all the pressure on you, obviously it's a lot to deal with. But at the same time, you would hope to him to put on a bit more of a show in himself. But I just don't necessarily know if the Crystal Palace noise and backing was even that big in general. But I don't know if necessarily I can say that or not. But nonetheless, billam-smith put out a very good performance. He's very good at sticking to a game plan and knowing what he has to do to win. He then called out Ramirez afterwards. I don't necessarily know if that fight would happen next, but hopefully big fights continue to happen for him because he is a world-class level fighter and he is delivering, and I do like his attitude as well. And so, I got my prediction wrong. I'll put my hands up and say that I thought Riakporhe would be able to do a lot more, perhaps make it more physical in his favour and get billam-smith on the ropes more than what he did, which was still a bit, but not quite enough. And in the end, like I say, credit to billam-smith. Moving on, Paro won by unanimous decision versus Matthias, become IBF World Super Lightweight Champion, and another brilliant performance. When you're against somebody who is as powerful as Matthias, what you kind of have to do is just nullify the power, and that's something in which Paro did so well. He really pushed Matthias back a lot, but like physically pushed him back, and as the conventionally weaker fighter out of the two, physicality wise, to be able to do what he did where he was just continuously pushing him, not letting Matthias get into the range where he wanted throughout the majority of the fight. The only times in which Matthias got into the range where he wanted was the only times he had success, and Matthias just didn't really want to throw at a mid-range with Paro, and Paro was not loading up on his shots, not trying to go for a stoppage, not trying to stand really toe-to-toe with Matthias. He was moving very nicely, tying up a lot when necessary, when he couldn't push Matthias away. And it was just a very good game plan, executed beautifully as well from Paro. I got my prediction wrong again, but I don't think anybody would have suspected how good of a game plan and how well Paro executed it. But yeah, when you're against somebody as powerful as Matthias, and that's what he's known for, a lot of the time them fighters will rely on that power to be able to get them through fights. And I believe Matthias probably did do that, and he just didn't really set up any of his shots or anything like that. He did just want to be on the inside, and when Paro, like I say, didn't let him do that, great performance from Paro. Yeah, and now he's one of the world champions in a very good weight division at the moment, and I'm sure huge fights which were available for Matthias before will be available for Paro next, and I'm sure that Prograis one, which was meant to happen I believe a little while ago, would probably end up happening next, which is a great fight for Prograis and, well, for Paro, and yeah, it's another huge fight, and just be interesting to see where Matthias can go from here. We'll have to wait and see, because losing against somebody like a Paro isn't anything like losing against somebody like a Haney or a Garcia or somebody like that. It's not as big of a name, so it does put him down the pecking order quite a lot, and that boogeyman type status he once had has dropped off now significantly, and so yeah, there is now a clear path to be able to beat Matthias, which has been shown, and I don't know, people might become more wanting to fight him, or people might just not want to give him the opportunity quite so much, and it'll be interesting to see what Matchroom do with him. Of course, just only recently signing him for that big contract deal. moving on, Conceição won by unanimous decision versus Falcao to become Brazilian super middleweight champion. Silva drew versus Sonnen. I was really excited for this exhibition, to be completely honest, just because I loved the storyline, which was Sonnen versus Silva in the UFC, and they were some of my favourite fights. And I was a massive fan of Chael Sonnen and just the attitude and the talking in which he always brought, one of the first people to really properly pioneer that. And Silva was also a legendary fighter as well, so I was really excited for the exhibition, but of course it didn't live up to any sort of expectation. To be completely honest, with hindsight, I wouldn't have complained if I never really saw that fight, and I didn't even see all of it, to be completely honest. I watched highlights because I wasn't going to watch that live, and I wasn't going to try find some stream or something to do that. And in general, it just looked like a glorified sparring fight, which was kind of expected, but I thought there would be a little bit more oomph from either of the two to really go for it, but neither of them seemingly really wanted to go for it too much. But doesn't mean that I dislike them anymore as fighters. I just don't necessarily think at the age in which they are that they should be boxing anymore. I'm not really too bothered if if we never see them in any sort of combat sports again. I think their time has come, and hopefully they will hang it up, but I'm not necessarily sure if they will. Sonnen might, but I don't know if Silva will, but we'll have to wait and see. Somebody who is gone from MMA to boxing and is doing very well is Cyborg, Chris Cyborg. She won by KO in round 2 versus Wild on the Crypto Fight Night this this last week, and against another opponent who isn't really got any experience or anything like that, but another knockout, and I believe she's 3-4-0 in boxing now, and creating a bit of a name for herself. If she really wants to go with this, she could definitely go into the actual female boxing scene and do something. So hopefully she will, but I'm sure she's getting the big paydays for the fights in which she is doing, so I don't necessarily know if she will or not. But yeah, she's a fighter in which I am keeping my eyes on as an MMA fighter going into boxing. Like I say, probably one of the ones best doing it at the moment. Tellez won by unanimous decision versus Dudek. Gonzalez won by unanimous decision versus Mulder. Whitmore won by majority decision versus Ellis. Villioria won via TK round 5 versus Contreras. Blancas won via TK in round 1 versus Schwartz. Davis won via split decision versus Garcia. Max Sargo won via unanimous decision versus Ramirez to become WBA Intercontinental Super Featherweight Champion. Adamus won via unanimous decision versus Gorsha to remain WBC World Middleweight Champion. Puello won via split decision versus Russell to become WBC Interim World Super Lightweight Champion. Benavides won via unanimous decision versus Vosdik to become WBC Interim World Light Heavyweight Champion. Davis won via KO in round 8 versus Martin to remain WBA World Lightweight Champion. And to speak about that card, another very stacked PBC card since, like I've been saying, since they've been joining up with Amazon Prime. They've only been putting on some really great events, to be completely honest. And I think people were arguing perhaps some of the fights on this was a bit too one-sided, but I think some of the matchups were actually better than expected. Perhaps not the main event, but in general, to go through some of the big fights. I mean, the Garcia loss is not really been talked about, the Elijah Garcia's loss. I didn't actually see the fight, but it's a huge loss. He was somebody who had a really big back-in and was progressing very nicely, and the loss is probably not going to define him, and it's only a split decision as well, but still to have that is a big shock, and I was very surprised to see it. Magsayo winning again, progressing as himself as a fighter, and I'm sure it won't be long for him to be back in world title contention. And for the super featherweight division at the moment, it is doing pretty well, and there's some big new names coming up into it, so I would love to see some big fights with him involved in. And then to speak about the world title type fights, the Adamus one versus Gorsha, pretty much what I expected. I mean, perhaps a little bit less of a punch output from Adamus in which I fought, but when he did, get going, both of them, it showed Gorsha is willing to stand and trade. He's going to be a game opponent, and he's going to be a tough opponent for anybody. But at the same time, Adamus is just a better fighter. I really like his body work all the time. He's very powerful in his work. He lets his combinations go very nicely. Perhaps the defense isn't always the best, but he does have a half-decent chin. And Gorsha was throwing shots back quite consistently with relatively nice combinations. But in the end, the Adamus pressure and his just combination style, like I say, body work was just too much, and that's kind of what I expected. I got my prediction right for that one. And in general, the middleweight division, like the commentators were saying, is screaming out for a big name. So hopefully we'll be seeing one to come through soon. Janovic's the biggest one at the moment. Damus versus Janovic is a great fight. I don't necessarily know if we'll see that next, but the people like Shiraz and Eubank Juniors are still around, so hopefully Adames gets a big fight soon. I think this was a good first defence for him, but like I said, I would love to see him fight some bigger names soon. The Puello versus Russell fight, of course, I don't really want to be praising too much of a drug, not cheat, maybe cheat, I don't know. Somebody who was tested positive for banned substances, I don't want to be praising him too much, but it was a really good performance from him. I can't really deny that. I hope there is no underlying drug contamination or anything for this fight that comes out, because it was actually a really good showing from him. His counters were really nice. The shot selection in which he was throwing was really nice. The smoothness in which he was letting his shots go and the speed he was using it, he looked very, very good and really kind of minimised the pressure that Russell puts on and showed Russell what that level of step up is to a world title, like interim fight. And I think Puello really showed his experience as well. And Russell in general, yeah, just didn't know really what to do when he was getting countered with such nice counters. And I got my prediction wrong, but fair play to Puello, probably was one of the best performances of the night. And then the Benavidez-Gvozdyk one, it was an interesting one. I got my prediction right, and I think he said it would have been a stoppage. I can't really remember, but people were expecting it to be a lot more one-sided than it was. Gvozdyk is a tough guy, and he really showed that. But at the same time, the power perhaps did look a little bit less from Benavidez, and of course, moving up in weight, that is going to have an effect. And Gvozdyk not really been fighting too much, and on the older side as well, to be able to go all the rounds, that was unexpected. And Benavidez was expected to go and put on a knockout performance and really look good. He looked good, and he was throwing his vintage combinations, his fast combinations, and landing them nicely, and was dominating the fight. But at the same time, he is expected to do a lot better than this. And when he puts that pressure on himself, I don't necessarily know where he's going to be able to go from here. I don't necessarily know what big fights are available. I doubt a Canelo fight's going to happen. Bivol Beterbiev one isn't obviously going to happen, so I don't necessarily know where he's going to go. So we're going to have to wait and see. Maybe I would love a Morel fight, but I don't necessarily think Morel is quite deserving of that opportunity yet. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But a step up in weight, and still a good, valiant performance from Benavidez. Just like I say, not quite as good as perhaps what people were expecting. But the Davis performance was a great performance. Martin, he was game. He was wanting to let his hands go. He was winning certain rounds, but at the same time, it's Davis's style is always just one in which he will allow you to win rounds to then just boost your confidence to then be able to find the openings available. But also at the same time, we saw a bit more of an attacking Davis from this one, which was really nice to see. I think Martin was trying to come in with a bit of a different game plan. He didn't just want to be too confident, too cocky, too much on the front foot to then just walk onto a shot. So he did invite Davis in, but also at the same time he was putting himself in dangerous positions in the corner. He was probably respecting Davis's power too much, and yeah, he just kept putting himself in bad positions, and it was bound to happen realistically that he would get stopped, but it was quite brutal fashion, and Davis yet again showing his power, and like I say, a bit more of aggressive Davis, which shows something a little bit more different as well, which was nice to see when he is against a perhaps on paper lesser opponent. He is able to get him out of there in impressive fashion as well, and not just coast for a unanimous decision victory, and to be able to do the backflip and all the excitement that comes around with a Davis fight. He's somebody who, when he's in the ring, I want to see him fighting, and he's somebody who is going to get bums on seats always, and hopefully he'll be back fighting again soon. It won't be quite as big of a break or anything like that, or it won't be a big break at all, and hopefully it'll be a big name. But he is in talks. Davis is in talks to fight Lomachenko in November, what Bob Arum has said, so that would be ideal. That would be perfect. It'd be a great fight, and yeah, that's probably the one that I want to see the most. The Shakur one's also being talked about at the moment as well, but perhaps that could be early next year. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, that's all the boxing news. Moving on now to the MMA news. Burns is set to fight Brady September 7th. Cortez will fight Maverick July 20th. Chimaev versus Whittaker is off. Chimaev, I believe, getting ill the week before, which was sad to see. I really just want to see Chimaev back in the cage, to be completely honest. It's been a while now, and that hype has definitely dropped off around him. McGregor vs Chandler is also off. I believe this is one of the first times McGregor has actually pulled out of a fight, but I believe it's in talks to be late August or late September to be rearranged, but I don't necessarily know if we will ever see McGregor back in the UFC again. Obviously, I'd love to see him because of everything that comes with that, but I just don't necessarily know. And the way that it went about, it being called off with, the presser being called off and then the uncertainties and things like that, it's a bit messy. And I don't know, Chandler is just waiting around for this McGregor fight because he knows it's such a big payday and he doesn't want to risk going and fighting somebody else and then losing the opportunity to fight McGregor, which I don't really blame him financially for. But at the same time, I just don't necessarily know if we are going to see McGregor fight in UFC again. We'll have to wait and see. Whitaker will fight Alaskarov June 22nd. Pereira will fight Prochazka June 29th. Him stepping in as the replacement fight against Prochazka is credit to him. It's a great fight. The first one was a great fight, and now to see this as a rematch, it's credit to him. It's a lot of weight to drop from what I've seen, from what I've heard for Pereira, but if he can do it, then why not put on that fight again? Another great fight, like I mentioned, and I'm sure it's going to end in dramatic fashion and saving the UFC 303 card. Hill versus Ulberg is off. Smith will fight Ulberg June 29th, and that's quite a big of a downgrade of a fight as well. The UFC 303 card has been hurt quite badly this week. Ortega will fight Lopez June 29th. Pereira wants to fight, obviously have that fight against Prochazka and then fight in November or December, have a break, but a 5-month break really isn't long at all for such a great champion. So full credit to him, really wants to make the most of the spell in which he's under at the moment, and I just really want him to move up to heavyweight. We're just going to have to wait and see how long that takes, but hopefully it will happen at some point, perhaps after the Prochazka defence. If he wins. Moving on, Knudsen won by decision versus Polastri. Costa won via submission round 2 versus Verdambiek. Wilson won via submission round 1 versus Sarigi. Fernandez won via decision versus Judish. Marnez won via decision versus Flick. Full Guilt won via decision versus Quinlan. Albayev won via decision versus Johnson. Highstand won via submission round 3 versus Armfield. Almeida won via decision versus Kuamba. Johns won via decision versus Andrade. Tara won via KO in round 2 versus Perez. And to speak about a couple of fights, the Highstand 1 versus Armfield was a great fight. I believe the first round was all just back-to-back submission attempts from both fighters. Then it went to just back-to-back, just a standing up fight in the second round where Highstand was hurt badly, and then to be able to get a submission into the third round, Highstand, very impressive. And there's just always ones in UFC fight nights, just fights that are just entertaining, and that was one of them. And the Almeida Kuamba fight, that was a good fight. Almeida was dominant in my opinion, and I think it was a good striking showing, but Almeida showed some really good, sharp, just powerful snapping combinations. The straight 1-2 was very nice when he executed that well. And then the main event, Tara, that submission was a beautiful, that KO, I suppose, or, the thing that he did to be able to get on the back and then create the space to be able to take Perez down when he was on his back was just really impressive. And you could see that's what he was aiming to do, to pop out the knee and to do that. People will perhaps say it was just, see it as an injury and be like, oh, he didn't really, it was fluky or anything like that. But I fully think he knew what he was doing there and he'd executed that before. And it was brutal, to be honest. But a very creative takedown attempt, and it worked very well for him. And he's entertaining. I like his little thing that he does at the end of fights in the post-fight thing, and I would like to see him getting more big fights. I think he's definitely a big name now in the flyweight division, and maybe 1 or 2 more fights and he could be up there fighting Pantoja. And he's somebody who's definitely to keep an eye on in the flyweight division. But that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you didn't, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.